Let's talk about that stimulus update. You know, many people wondering, are we going to see these $3,600 checks? Are we going to see $6,600 checks or even over $10,000 stimulus payments, right? Those are already going out to people. Will those now be cut in half? Instead of $3,600 for a child tax credit, will that be cut in half or eliminated after a year or year and a half? Look, we had hoped that these things were going to be extended in perpetuity, right? We kept hearing about how transformative the child tax credit would be to families. In addition, just to the child tax credit stimulus, we were also talking about those that didn't have children, right? Not only like the earned income tax credit, but additional credits. So stimulus checks that would go out to people that don't have children. All of that being talked about as part of this $3.5 trillion stimulus package. Well, guess what? We're getting reports this morning that lawmakers in Congress are getting ready to go along with Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and are preparing to consider huge cuts to the emergency $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. I'm talking right now, folks, slashing it in half. $1 to $2 trillion if we're lucky. Maybe $1.5 trillion. Maybe $1.75 trillion. Remember, this bill is designed to fight the climate apocalypse and provide a safety net to struggling Americans. It's not surprising, but what is surprising is how callous legislators are right now and exactly what they're doing at the same time. The same lawmakers that want to slash the stimulus budget are nonchalantly advancing a defense spending plan that would put America on track to spend more than twice as much on the Pentagon in the same period of time. I want you to hear me again. So instead of passing a $3.5 trillion stimulus package, okay, that would fight climate change, help the elderly, help young children, help families, right, help our infrastructure in the United States compete on the global stage, and we are woefully behind with a terrible food system that's making people sick.
And then a healthcare system that doesn't help them when they are.
Right. And then a healthcare system that charges them 10 times as much as other parts of the world, and prescription drugs that cost 10 times as much. All of that. No vision care, dental care, hearing care. The United States is garbage at this point. So what instead are we going to spend money on? Well, it looks like, folks, that we are about to double the amount of money we're spending on defense. The purse is now open in the post 9/11 flood of military contracts. So, interestingly, the costs and consequences of the United States 21st century wars have been now well documented, according to the Jacobin. A staggering $8 trillion in expenditures and more than 380,000 civilian deaths, as calculated by Brown University's Cost of War project. Okay.
Well, and that's going to be very conservative based on, what they consider civilians.
Oh, yeah, true. Exactly. Corporations large and small have left the financial feast of that post 9/11 surge in military spending with genuinely staggering sums in hand. After all, Pentagon spending has totaled almost an unimaginable $14 trillion plus since the start of the Afghan war in 2001. Up to
Think
one
of
half.
what percentage of our national debt that is.
Yeah. 28 trillion, right? 28 trillion is our national debt. Think about it. Half going to war. Unbelievable.
And them saying the purse is now open, was it ever shut for the military?
No, but it's interesting that AOC I'll get to her in a second here. There was an attempt to try to get this reduced. I mean, this is exactly what was tried to happen here. House Democrats this week or last week opposed, actually a group of House Democrats said they wanted the defense budget slashed by 10%. But guess what? That didn't happen. I'll tell you more about that in a second. The dichotomy, though, spotlights just how even after the war in Afghanistan concluded, the military-industrial complex is now poised for massive growth in the years to come. Indeed, that's precisely the conclusion of that July report by the world's largest corporate consultancies, as well as a recent military contractor earnings calls that took place after the Afghan war ended. Their predictions are double growth. And the U.S. Congress appears to be ready to line their pockets. The end of the United States' longest-running war might appear to be a setback for defense industry spending and investors, and military contractors and business interests, but it's not. In fact, it's a major area of growth over the next few years. Well, how do you, and try to wrap your head around that, right? Because you're thinking, oh, we're done in Afghanistan. Clearly, well, how are we going to spend money additionally now? How are we going to do this? Because we're not in Afghanistan. So like, where is all this money going to go?
Well, and can we, the American people, is it possible for us to, reach out to them and say, hey, could we just get a line item breakdown receipt of where all this money goes? Like just out of curiosity. I mean, I think it's our money. Yeah. So I feel like if it's our money, we're going to increase your budget again. I think we should at least know, like, who is this money going toward? Because that's an awful lot of money. And there's no way that it's going towards bombs, because bombs aren't that expensive. What's it going toward?
No, why don't you try that? Why don't you try to reach out to them and see if they'll give you a line item breakdown about where this money is going?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to get on the phone right now. Who do I call? Like who would be the best?
Yeah, call the switchboard at the Pentagon. See where you get to. See if you get an answer on that.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to get very far.
I'll report back.
I'll check back with you in a few weeks.
Okay.
While you're on hold. So whether or not the country is actively engaged in formal armed conflicts or not, it doesn't matter, because of the rising global instability, they say, right? And now we've got fallout from COVID-19 pandemics, instability in other regions around the world, not even just in the United States, right? We're worried about like Africa. Africa now, because of COVID, is unstable, right? And we're worried that that's a vacuum for terrorists, right? The ambitions of the U.S. Space Force. So that new joke, right? Trump's Space Force. So now we need to spend trillions in additional monies towards a Space Force, and also brand new powerful military technologies. And those who profit from global warfare are expecting really profitable years to come.
You know what's crazy? It's like you hear all this talk of like people, talking about aliens coming here and how, they've obviously been here and they'd be peaceful and all this other stuff. But think about if we got a Space Force and we could go on other planets, we would go to kill them. Like we would go to take their planet so that we could populate it with ourselves. We would be the ones that you would not want to have go to your planet. Isn't that crazy?
Right. Like the rest of the universe is really peaceful. It's very peaceful. By the way, if you want to dive into, there are whistleblowers that used to work as part of the secret space program. Like I don't need to go down that rabbit hole on this show. If you want more information on that, come over to my Paranormal Post channel on YouTube and you can learn more about it. But there are plenty of people who worked at the highest levels of the military as part of a secret space program. And we basically had to beg to get a seat at the table. And we are the most crude savage of anybody who is a part of that. And you're absolutely right. Like we're going to we're going to go in other parts of the universe or other parts of the solar system and land on different planets or whatever. We would be the ones that would try to colonize and take it over. Like that's what
they got oil. They got oil. Oh my gosh.
They got minerals. We need those things. So David Sirota, who's a great journalist, says, this is a battle about corporate interests. It's all it is. The whole money that's being battled for right now in this reconciliation package and stimulus, it's all about corporate money.
To me, the reconciliation bill debate is really, it's not a battle between progressives and centrists, quote unquote. It's a battle between basic climate science, the basic policies we know we need to do to deal with things like the healthcare crisis and inequality. That's on one side, versus blatant corruption, right? I mean, like, let's just be honest about what's happening here. I mean, this is a battle between essentially what people need and what money wants. But if you pay attention to the corporate media's coverage of this battle, you think it's a battle between ideological factions or, a palace drama or, one or two politicians over here who just have an honest disagreement. That, in other words, money is written out of the story. That there's a giant mountain of corporate campaign cash that lots of Washington reporters are literally standing in the shadow of and pretending doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's the key, right? And the mainstream media doesn't cover that at all. Like CNN, Fox, they don't cover that. They don't cover those stories. Are you gonna ever see that on CNN? You're gonna see.
They can't lose that ad money.
Yeah, well, that's right. Are you gonna see Brian Stelter covering that angle?
You're cracking me up.
Sorry, Brian, but I mean, let's be honest. You're not gonna cover that angle, right? You're going to continue to have these politicians on your air and pretend it's an ideological battle between moderates and progressives. That's garbage. It's not true. We know it's the case that these profit predictions are all driven by a Congress that's so far continuing to approve even higher and higher Pentagon budgets and rejecting measures to reduce defense spending. I mean, the House of Representatives last Thursday voted overwhelmingly to reject 2 amendments that would have reduced the military budget for 2022. One would be cut by 10%. Another would have lopped off just 3%. The amendment to cut the budget by 10%, which was offered by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, was rejected by a vote of 86 to 332. It would have applied a 10% reduction to all the accounts and funds authorized by the National Defense Authorization Act. But get this, what it wouldn't have slashed, AOC would not have slashed the Defense Health Program, would not have slashed money for military personnel. They don't get paid enough as it is. And it wouldn't have slashed the civilian employee pay. But what would it have slashed? It would have slashed additional money for bombs. That's what it would have done. But guess what? It got voted down overwhelmingly. So what's going on here? I thought we were done with the war in Afghanistan. So clearly we shouldn't be spending so much money, right? Wrong. As we predicted here on the show, the end of the war in Afghanistan is just smoke and mirrors. And as the Daily Poster reports, quote, while the end of the United States' longest-running war might appear to be a setback for defense industry investors, military contractors and the business interests that track them expect to see major growth in the sector over the next few years, whether or not the country is actively engaged in formal armed conflicts, because of rising global instability, fallout from COVID-19 pandemic, and the ambitions of the U.S. Space Force and a powerful new military technology. It'll be profitable for years to follow.
You know, and the thing is, like, you at what point do you not realize that this is 100% about corporations, right? Like, for instance, Venezuela. Let's talk about Venezuela. When they were talking about nationalizing oil, right? And giving the money back to the people. And what did we do? We freaked out because we can't have any country that has nationalized oil because we get that oil. So we had to go in and cause all this trouble. And that's the thing. Like, we think that, like, sanctions and stuff, when we put sanctions on Afghanistan, we put sanctions on Iran, we put sanctions on Russia, sanctions on Venezuela. Those sanctions kill people. It makes it so they can't get insulin. It makes them so they can't get medicine and foods that they need. And so all of these things are acts of war. And it's like we sit there and we try to say that we're this global force for good. But, like, you see when these things happen, when these people try to do something that is counter to us getting their resources, the things that we do and the things that we say to change that into, no, we got to do something, like, this is important, we need this or we need that. And they just can continually throw money at them to do these things. So these corporations, you know, will get these contracts to go in and build bridges and build roads over there, but not here. Like, we can't do it here, but we're doing it all around the world. And you're watching, I mean, you're watching with this Kyrsten Sinema, a perfect example of what you're just talking about, right? You're watching all of this corporate money flowing to this senator to make sure that they, A, don't pay higher taxes, B, continue to make bank money on defense contracts and all kinds of government grants and free flowing money. And she is getting $10,000, $5,000 checks written to them at all of these fundraisers to make sure that they are protected. I mean, and this is how it happens. Big money flows right to these guys, and these guys and girls craft policy that helps them, that helps these big businesses. It does not help the American people. And then you also have the people on the boards of these like Raytheon and things like these defense contractors ending up on the boards of government agencies. Mm-hmm. And then in the news, on news channels, as experts that are just feeding us their propaganda on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, like Dick Cheney, sir, you know, was on Halliburton, you know, was the CEO of Halliburton. Like, who benefits from the Iraqi war, the war in Iraq? Halliburton. I mean, it's unbelievable. So the Daily Poster goes on with this. As corporate Democratic lawmakers threaten to kill the party's climate and healthcare spending bill, the party is moving forward with a defense budget that puts the country on track to spend $8 trillion on national defense over the next decade, an amount that is twice as large as the price of the Democrats' safety net legislation, the stimulus, and equal to the amount the country spent on post-9/11 wars. If that spending is not curtailed, it could mean an enormous jackpot for Wall Street and corporate arms dealers.
But they're not. Who's asking how we're going to pay for that? Like, where's that conversation?
No, they're not asking that question at all. And Republicans and Democrats will be all over this like stink on a monkey. They will approve it. They already are. Last week, they did this. Last week. Did you hear much about it in the mainstream media?
I didn't even hear about it.
Yeah. Did you hear how AOC put forward an amendment that would slash it by 10% and it got totally shot down? Did you see that happened? No, you didn't. Wasn't covered really anywhere. Certainly wasn't covered in the mainstream media. And all of the coverage really was around the debt ceiling and the infrastructure stimulus. So there are your corrupt politicians lining the pockets of these defense contractors routinely, and it's about to double. While your stimulus package to help America, which is crumbling, this is an empire. Folks, make no mistake about it. You are watching an empire crumbling before your eyes. Crumbling right now before your eyes. It's going to be one of those, we talk about the great American experiment, right? Think about it. The United States might not even make it to, you think about the hundreds of years old that countries like, in Europe are, hundreds and thousands of years old that have a history of colonization and wars, and finally said, you know what, we've grown up. The United States might not even make it to 400 years old, 350 years old.
People always like draw a parallel to us and the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire lasted longer than we're going to.
Yeah, thousands. I mean, think how long the Roman Empire lasted.
Yeah, but right? The thing is, like, that's the thing. Like, they didn't collapse militarily. They collapsed economically because they were spending money completely out of control. Like, they were spending way more money than they had. They were in debt and had all this huge debt. And they had their military spread out all over the whole world. And they were trying to take as much land as they could and taking over civilizations as much as they could. And they collapsed economically. And then the military just fell.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Did you see, while I'm wrapping this up, by the way, I don't know if you saw, but did you see there was these, Joe Manchin was on a yacht and all these kayakers went by. And
somebody was just saying something about it in chat.
And they were yelling, don't sink West Virginia. Don't sink West Virginia. They're all out there. Out of his houseboat. He's got his houseboat down there in Washington, D.C. So that's where Joe Manchin's houseboat. I mean, he has a houseboat, right? Don't sink West Virginia, Joe. But here's your houseboat. You can park it and take it wherever you want. Well,
what a lost opportunity. He should have called that Water Mansion.
Water Mansion. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. You can also become a channel member by going to morninginvest.com/join, where you can stick it to the mainstream media and support independent journalism. We're able to bring you the stories that you won't see on any of the major billionaire-backed networks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, everyone.